class is a class. It's
Yes,
a
of
full
course.
semester course.
Yeah.
The big difference is one's called an immersion program. The shorter travel program is an immersion program. I try to focus more on the experience of the businesses and the in this case the families that we visit and looking at their factories. So we do many visits in a short amount of time. We might do even 2 family visits and look at their operations a day. The business challenges facing the country, but also how do you actually work here? What's it like to talk to leaders here? What's it like to deliver a project to someone who's in the country? And so those are the kind of 2 different goals of the different programs.
Hello, this is Professor Ravi Sarathi, and this is the International Business Today podcast series. As you know, the IBT focuses on international business topics of importance to practitioners, academics, and students. My guest today is Professor Greg Collier. He's a professor of practice in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group here at Demore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University. He's the Director of International Programs for the Northeastern University Center for Entrepreneurship Education, NUC, and he leads Northeastern's entrepreneurship ecosystem development efforts in a number of countries: India, MENA, the Middle East and North Africa, Korea, South Korea, and Southeast Asia. His work in India was recently recognized by the Prime Minister, with the Indian Ministry of Human Resource and Development, MHRD, choosing the program to partner with the top 10 Indian public state universities on building up the entrepreneurial ecosystem with over 1,500 applicants for a national startup competition. Prior to academia, Professor Collier held senior management positions with Electronic Data Systems, now part of HP, managing manufacturing systems in the Asia-Pacific region for almost a decade, and services commercialization for Fidelity Investments, deploying information systems and data centers. Greg, welcome to our IBT podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Too long a list.
Our podcast focuses on international business. And one of the cornerstones of any IB education, I think, is gaining international experience, whether it's through travel or study abroad, working abroad, taking classes overseas, and carrying out business projects in different countries. Greg, that's, I think, one of the things you do. And you've developed many such courses for Northeastern's undergraduate students, including DMSB, featuring these kinds of overseas work-related experiences. Why do you think such experiences are so fundamental to helping students develop an understanding of international business?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's because I'm biased. My career really took off when I started to explore international opportunities, and I was given a shot quite early in my own career. But I did not have the opportunity to learn about it or understand it when I was in the classroom, when I was studying undergrad and my MBA programs later. And so Northeastern gave me a chance to explore kind of international opportunities across the undergrad and graduate programs. And with the undergraduate programs, it was a good chance to take the theoretical stuff that we talked about in the classroom, and even with projects and case studies where you get a chance to get some exposure to the concepts. This was a chance to talk to people who did it. This was a chance to go look at the work that they were doing and ask questions about the challenges they were facing, both in the country that they're working in and where their businesses were established, as well as, and even originally the concept was, how do I compete with non-family businesses that are taking on and coming in and competing with me in my own backyard, and how can I compete with them kind of globally? So those were the kind of things that it gave them a chance to experience and try to do the work as opposed to just read about it.
So it's the Northeastern tradition of melding classroom work with experiential learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm a huge fan of the experience side.
Good. You do many kinds of immersive experiences, but from our chat, you do have 2 major kinds of efforts. One, a shorter duration program, and one of longer duration. You want to tell us a little bit about these immersive experiential study programs?
Sure. In fact, I was thinking about the terms that we were using when we chatted originally about this. Duration is the same. A class is a class. It's
Yes,
the
of
full
course.
semester course.
Yeah.
The big difference is one's called an immersion program. The shorter travel program is an immersion program, and the longer travel programs are what we call dialogues. And so the goals of the two different types of programs are different. The designs of those are different. Because of the shorter term travel, I try to focus more on the experience of the businesses and the in this case the families that we visit and looking at their factories. So we do many visits in a short amount of time. We might do even 2 family visits and look at their operations a day over 6 to 7 days, and we'll visit as many as 10 different businesses during the time we're there. The longer time programs are more balanced between the cultural exposure as well as the business exposure. So we'll normally work with one company, or the students will work with one company where they're there for a month, but at the same time they're taking their class during the time that they're interacting with the business on the ground. And they're also having someone from the country that we're in on the teams working on the projects that they're assigned to. So this gives them a little bit different cultural exposure, not just what's going on kind of in the country and the business challenges facing the country, but also how do you actually work here? What's it like to talk to leaders here? What's it like to deliver a project to someone who's in the country? And so those are the kind of 2 different goals of the different programs. The short program has a supporting classroom model that happens before we go to the 1 week or 10-day event. So there's a lot of prep work ahead of time.
Now, this shorter duration program, why do you focus so much on family businesses? Why is that the point of contact for students?
There's a lot of interesting things. So I'm in the entrepreneurship group, right? So I think that's one question is, what's family business have to do with entrepreneurship?
Right.
There's a huge question around, can family businesses actually be more innovative and entrepreneurial? And in fact, the initial family business is very entrepreneurial, right? And so we're exploring, and I like to explore that innovative characteristic or quality of family businesses. So that's one reason why we explore them. The other one is maybe a little bit more from an operational perspective, which I'd like to touch on a bit. We have a lot of families who are alumni or have students who've come to the university, and they want to participate in the university in different ways. It's a great opportunity for our university to work with these alumni in their countries and give back to them in some ways, where we go visit and interact with the families that are there. Obviously, family businesses outside of the U.S. represent 70 to 80% of all businesses. Inside the U.S., it's about 50%. So it's a huge economic engine for growth in outside of the U.S. in particular. And so it's a great place to see innovation on the ground, the decision making that family members can make if allowed, if they can get over their paralysis sometimes. But it's an opportunity to see that entrepreneurial energy in motion and in action.
Yeah, and I've often read family businesses have 2 goals: advancing the family and advancing the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's unusual given our reliance more on equity, public equity, stock exchange traded firms. So I think that might be something that comes across.
It's a great point. I think the challenge, and this is that particular class, the challenge is to the students. I look at families, students who come from a family business, and the challenge for them is, do you want to go back to your family business? Do you want to start your own business and have nothing to do with your family business? Or do you want to go back to your family business and start the next spin-off that's leveraging resources from your firm? And they don't really know. And so the class gives them a lot of material to think about when it comes to topics like professionalization or ownership, innovation in the family, and can they do it? And as they contemplate those, the interesting thing is after they go talk to these families on the ground and they listen to the experiences of, succession plans and passing business from one to another, most of them end up wanting to go back, but not to the core business. They mostly want to go back and spin out that next opportunity. And we've seen a lot of our students successfully.
So what's a typical day-to-day like? If you actually, like you were in Thailand. So
Thailand was an awesome trip. I highly recommend Thailand as a visit, especially if you want to give your students exposure to manufacturing. In the U.S., kind of a lot of our students have lost touch with what is manufacturing really all about, even though all these products are still made somewhere in the world. So normally what will happen is we get up pretty early, and if it's a family business day, we'll meet up with the family ahead of time, and we'll get an introduction to them. They'll talk about their family, maybe the governance structure that they've got in place, whether they have family members in the business or not, whether it's purely an ownership model or not. So we normally get through those kind of conversations first. The students are all prepped beforehand. So we have 7 or 8 weeks of classes before that where we study professionalization of a family business, governance, global expansion, and so on. So we study a lot of these. And they're coming in ready to talk to these families about those topics and how they've addressed them. And so that's normally the morning session. And then after that, we'll spend anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 hours where we'll go on a tour inside the facilities. We went to a fastening company, we went to a robotics manufacturing company, and anything in between. We talked to a company that made shoes, and kind of a licensing model, which was very interesting on how they executed their own business. So they learn a lot about business models as well, because these families are trying to figure out how can I compete and create some differentiation, whether I'm in Thailand or I'm selling regionally. And so that's normally the afternoon. And after that is an interesting time for the family to then kind of create what we call networking opportunities. So we'll have a dinner event. The dinners are normally attended by CEOs or family-owned business owners from other businesses that are friends or in their network. And we'll talk, we'll kind of do a rotation at the dinner table where the students get a chance to talk to all of these business leaders about different issues that they've faced running their family business. To the point where we've done this program in the Middle East regularly, and we had the president of Pepsi company at the table for one of the events. He just happened to be there and was friends of one of the families we were visiting. So it's a great opportunity to create this network. So this kind of program, as I mentioned, is very family business, and culturally it's the business culture of the country we're in predominantly. We do have some. We might take a cultural tour in an evening or an afternoon or on the weekend that's free, but it's mostly focused on interacting and getting to know the business.
So what kind of feedback do you get from the family businesses that you choose as sites to visit, and from the students? What do they tell you about their experience? Their perceptions, what they learn.
The most common compliment I get, and normally the families are ecstatic to have the students come. The families, one of their goals is to create advocates. They want students to come and experience their country in a positive way and see the energy that's there, and go back to the U.S. and come back to our classrooms and their classrooms and talk to their friends about how great it is in whatever country, whether it's the Middle East or whether it's Korea or whatever. So that's one of their goals, and they accomplish that. I can tell you. But the other thing they say, and they're very impressed. They always congratulate me on how smart my grad students are. And these are undergrads. And I think it's the preparation that really, and that's where the students get excited about. They know what they're going to learn. They're going to be asked, and they're going to talk about with people who have run these businesses, right? So they know they have to be on their best game in order to interact. So the students really step up. Most of the students, I can't think of a class where they don't say, whether it's the program or the embedded or the dialogue program, that it was the most influential class of their undergraduate career. And that's a pretty common, whether it's my class or, I've heard it for other programs that I run as well, where it's just so, it's so impactful, because not only are they engaging directly with these business leaders, but they're spending a lot of time with each other, reflecting on what's going on. And most of them are from a family business in this case, right? And then they start to network with each other, and they identify opportunities for their own businesses, whether it's with the families we're visiting or if it's with those who
their colleagues
in the classroom.
Nice.
So it's a really kind of multi-pronged impact that they can experience.
Okay, let's turn to the dialogue.
Yeah.
The consulting focus groups. What is it that's unique about these, and how are they different from the visits to family businesses?
Yeah, so I think what we call a dialogue is maybe a more common approach to international programs that many other schools might try. But I would say there's some unique differences about what we're hoping to do. The first thing is that we normally assign a team to a company, so they'll work with a company for a month while we're on the ground in country. And so they have to do some prep work ahead of time, just to kind of get an understanding of what the company is and who they are, right? And then the other big difference is because we have some cultural barriers, right? We might have language barriers. We certainly have cultural behavioral barriers that they don't understand. And so as part of the team, I get 1 or 2 students who are from, in this case, Korea, where we go regularly, to be on the team and interact throughout the month. They come and they sit in the classroom when we're doing classroom exercises, and then they go to the client and help manage the project with them. So this is a real consulting engagement. We have a problem identified. The customer works with us throughout the month that we're there, and then we give them feedback and solutions if we can come up with them. And so it's a real life experience. And I think those two pieces are, I think, pretty unique.
Yeah. So what is the kind of company, the profile that you look for when you're going to select a firm for this particular project?
It's not easy. So it's an entrepreneurship class as well. Right. So I'm looking at, in this case, someone who's going to be around and has some money and time. Normally it's Series A, maybe they've raised some money and they've got some time and they've got a team that they can that we can work with. Most of them are companies that were looking to answer the problem: does my product fit in the U.S. market, and how can I bring my product to the U.S. market? So that tends to be the primary method or mission. But we also do a wide range of projects. Like we're trying to expand in Southeast Asia. What do we do? Where do we go next? We're trying to improve our fit inside Korea. How do we do that? So it can be any type of firm. They tend to be technology because A, that's my interest. B, Seoul in particular is a technology-centered arena. So we tend to focus on those as well.
So is one company sufficient, depending on the
class?
So
no, normally because that program I bring 20 to 25 students, we have 5 companies.
5 companies, okay.
So I get to go source those. Fortunately, I lived in the region for a long time, so that helps me. But I do work with university partners to help identify both companies that we can work with, as well as help with a lot of other
and what about
programs.
Confidentiality? Is that an issue?
So it's interesting. That feels like a very U.S.-based question. But there are times where they'll ask for NDA agreement, which we will sign. But normally it's not a question.
So what does the cycle look like? If you're there for 4 weeks, it's a pretty long span of time.
Yeah, so this is a very different experience for the student.
Right.
When you're with students for 9 or 10 days, fun. It's a fun experience, and most of the buzz of the excitement of being and traveling is still there. A month is a long time. And so the first 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, you have that energy and excitement, but then you have to figure out how do you get over I start to miss home, I miss the food that I want, there's a lot of other things that start to come up. My roommates are bothering me or whatever, human issues start to come up. We do work a lot, and at Northeastern, we're blessed as well. We have a group that helps prepare faculty who want to run these kind of programs called GEO, our Global Experiential Office, I think is the name of it. And so we have a lot of training for the faculty as well as the students before we go on these programs to educate them on the issues they may face, how do you resolve them, best practices, so that we can get through that, especially if it's 4 weeks or longer in other dialogue cases. But how do you manage that so it's a positive experience? I've been fortunate. I've done this probably 8 years, And I've been blessed with great students. We haven't had any real issues.
Since it's a consulting project, do the
Yeah.
students prepare a final report and present it to the client? Do
Yeah.
they get feedback on that?
Yes, so they it's just like a real consulting engagement where they have to do problem identification. They create a statement of work, what's in and outside of scope. They have to interact. They have the lead who might have the relationship with the CEO and normally the CEO will participate, but then who else in the organization, and what are our deliverables? And so and then we do a final presentation with a deliverable to the client as a recommendation. Some get adopted and some don't, but
right.
Just like any other.
Many consultants face the same
Yeah, exactly.
outcome.
Exactly.
So let me ask you some broader questions.
Sure.
For example, how do students get picked for these courses? Is it competitive?
Yeah, it's very competitive. The dialogues are required, so you have to have this experience and
Before you graduate?
Yeah, so mostly we see the younger students vying for those dialogues early, they're at the end of their freshman year, beginning or into their sophomore year. The pandemic was a blessing, frankly, because we weren't able to offer the dialogue for a couple of years. Well, then I had a bunch of seniors and juniors, or last final year students who wanted to go on a dialogue, and it makes so much difference if you can get a little bit more mature audience, especially when you're taking them overseas. So they're very competitive. I normally have, for 20 seats, I normally have 100 to 150 applicants. So I have to have some criteria in order to judge them, base my selection on. I try to create as diverse a student population as I can. And diversity really is kind of what countries are they from, what are they studying, what degrees are they interested in? Because I don't want all business students, I don't want all engineers, I don't want all, everyone from the U.S. or I try to make that as diverse a profile as possible. And it is pretty competitive.
And I think I want to emphasize what you've just said, that this is not just for business students. This is for people across the university. So you could have engineers and media types and computer science folks and so on.
And in fact, both programs, the family business programs, most of the family business students, because I want them to come for that particular embedded program, I prefer students who come from a multi-generational family because it has much more relevance to them. And most of those don't study in the business school. They're studying somewhere else or across the university. For the other dialogues, though, I don't want solutions that are bounded, right? So if I only know business, then I might have a marketing solution, but I don't necessarily have sound recommendations around the technology or the engineering or the design or any of those things.
And what is the preparation for language and cultural differences ahead of time? Do you do any training, or do you expect them to pick it up?
Yeah, so language, because it's only a month, especially for the short programs, nothing other than the exposure that when we're there. For the longer programs, I actually run a language class. So I have a 2-hour class, 10 sessions while they're there, just to give them some exposure. And they're
You run the language class?
I have a teacher who teaches.
Oh, nice! In every country.
Yeah, when I run the dialogue in the country, if it's a month long, I run a language class. Students love it, except for when it gets in the way of their project.
Now, you mentioned earlier the every university wants this, to get closer to alumni.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned to me that you work closely with NU advancement groups. So can you talk about their role in picking companies or in helping you with logistics, et cetera?
Universities have connections, and that's something that if you're trying to run an international program and you've never done it before, then the first place to reach out to is your advancement or the group that manages your alumni, because we have, every university has someone somewhere in the world who's been successful and would be willing to share their time with you, right? And so the advancement group at Northeastern does a great job of connecting me with family members in particular, whether it's a family business or not, to identify and find opportunities to go engage with them. And normally it's got to be kind of geolocated, right? So families around Bangkok or families around Seoul or business relationships that are there. And so it's a great group to help do that and build those relationships. And in many cases, especially for those who care about the cost of the programs, the families, especially for the family business program, are very generous. And we've never had a student have to pay for that particular class because the families donate hotel room space or transportation or travel in some cases. And so it's a great way to engage with the alumni and have a real meaningful interaction for both the students.
It's
and
also important because equity, if affordability is not a constraint, that becomes much more widely accessible to students, which is a good outcome.
It's a great point because I've had students who would otherwise never have been able to make that trip. If they were financially responsible for it, they would not have been able to do it. So,
now you mentioned classroom work. Do you have classroom work only before you go, or also, when you're in country, particularly on the consulting project? I can see that they would need some continual education to accompany the stage of the project.
So the consulting program is 2 classes. So there are 2 full classes during the month. So we are in the classroom every day of the week, all day. And whether it's language training for 2 hours, or whether it's a lecture for 3 hours, or whether it's project work. So when they're not with the clients, they're in the classroom, and we're covering topics that are relevant, whether it's how to engage with, how do you deal with scope creep, or how do you deal with a CEO who doesn't want to listen to you. So we deal with, and then we work on the design side as well. So if it's a go-to-market solution, we work on those. So there's classroom engagement. So those are graded just like any other class where you have topics, you might have a case, some exercises for them to work on. But most of it is reflective. So we have the other course, right? The first course is kind of the content course, but the other course is the experience course. And this is where I look for reflections. What are you learning? What are you seeing? How is your mind being changed about what you thought? So we'll have a pre-trip reflection. What do you think? And we'll have a post-trip reflection. Okay, now what do you think? And how did that change? And why did it change? And what does it mean to you? And contextually, it could be either in how I think about business in this country, or how I just think about the country. Whatever really has invigorated them on the trip.
Now, one of the things you mentioned was partners in the local community, whether it's a university partner or some other kind. So can you tell us a little bit about the partnering effort on your part?
So the consulting program, because it's such a commitment, I really do rely on a university partner who's on the ground. They can also find businesses to help me with the project, but they do a lot of things like provide space. They provide guest speakers. There's a lot of things that the local partner can do for us. And we do this particular consulting program. We do in Italy. We've done it in Ghana in the past. We do it in Israel and others. And so those local partners really make the program work. They bring us the students, the local students to participate on the project. And they also help us with the cultural kind of interactions. Where should we go? They help us with tours. We have a formal tour guide, but they really help us pick and design the experience while we're there, because they know better than we do.
Yeah, I think a real plus is that students you take from Northeastern get to work with students from the local university. I think that's a huge gain because, well, you tell me, what did they learn when they worked together?
Yeah, I have to say that it's a tricky model because you have to make sure, and this is where experience helps, the students they're providing have to be extroverted. They have to be comfortable in an environment because they sit in my classroom. And they're getting a classroom experience that I can tell you a U.S. classroom experience is not the same, as I'm sure you know, than it is in most parts of the world where you have to be engaged in the class and interact and discuss and debate. And so they have to be that kind of student. So finding them is hard, but once you find them, this past year in Korea, we always pick who was like the leader for your group, and most of the teams picked their Korean student lead, one of the student leads, as the one who was the most influential in helping them guide this project, because they really opened up the world for them and let them experience something that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So.
Right. Now, I've taken students overseas, and so have you, and so have many other faculty, and there are all kinds of little details that are bothersome. Logistics,
Yes,
security, health, travel between locations, and sometimes student misbehavior. Right. So how do you take care of those kinds of issues?
That goes back to our GEO organization. Yeah. So we have the GEO group, and so they are the ones who deal with any vendors that we might need. So if we have to, even if families are offering it, the contracting process, the compensation and how the schedule, when do they show up and all that, that's typically managed outside of the faculty realm most of the time.
So you have an administrator who's helping you.
There's an administrator, and depending on the family business program, they actually are on the trip with us because they also may have relationships with the families. For the longer term programs, there's someone on the ground who we've contracted with, and so I have a point of contact, normally not a Northeastern person, but a point of contact who's managing all of that. Hotel issues, we had rooms that didn't have sheets and pillows when we got there, stuff like that we can always go to our third party vendors who we've negotiated with to help manage that, which is nice. You have to be flexible, right? I mean, sometimes a lot of it falls on the faculty. Misbehavior tends to fall on the faculty. I just left a planning session this afternoon where we talked about dealing with problem issues, that might come up with students. And so we're also trained, but then we can reach out to the university resources if there's a well-being issue or something along those lines. If does a student behavior warrant that they need to be sent home, and you're not on your own for that, we can reach out to our university resources and kind of decide how best to handle the situation.
Now, at the end of the day, these students all come back and earn degrees. Many of them will stay on and try to get jobs.
Right.
So if I'm an employer and I'm interviewing students, what would be the unique reasons that these students might be special, and therefore the employer should give them, a little bit more, attention before deciding?
It's a great question. I was in the hiring manager role for many years, 20 years before I came into academics, and having international experience is a big differentiation between the typical student and these students. And it may not mean much. It could just mean I experienced it, right? But I didn't really necessarily accomplish. I didn't deliver something. But having the exposure, being comfortable in foreign circumstances, being able to navigate those successfully says a lot about the student. Willingness to actually go put themselves in this kind of uncertainty position, right? I call it the ability to dance. Are you able to be in circumstances where you don't know what's going on? You're put on a boat in the middle of a river in China. What are you going to do? And I think that these students have the chance to talk about being in areas of uncertainty and newness and how they navigated it and how they managed it, which is what I think those who don't take that kind of trip probably can't talk about it in the same way.
And I'm sure it builds confidence to know that I've been able to navigate a foreign culture, live there for a period, work with local companies and students, and come back and reflect on it. I think that's a real confidence builder.
And for the month-long program, a lot of the time they're on their own. They're on their own in evenings to make kind of grown-up decisions, and what are they going to do? How are they going to accomplish their work plus experience what they want when they're there? So they have to make a lot of choices, and they're on their own. And so I think that you're right. The ability to do that kind of, and I can see them, especially after. I just ran into a student on the way over here who was on the trip this past summer. He's changed so much, and I think that experience really gave him a little bit more identity, self-identity. Who am I, and what do I reflect in this world? And I think that happens to a lot of them.
And that's lifelong learning. That'll stay with them for
a
life. Well, Greg, this has been a fantastic conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Really.
I really enjoyed this. So thank you for providing all these great insights into the value of offering our students, and it's really students from anywhere, the opportunity to experience living and working overseas, even for a short period. and also for giving us insights into how to craft and deliver such courses and to gain successful student outcomes, which we all want as educators. I think you've given us very useful ideas. And for employers, I think you've also pointed out something interesting, which is you want employees who are to some extent able to stand on their own feet and cope with emergencies and think, without wanting someone to say, do this.
Right.
So I think that's a very helpful thing. So overall, I hope this has been useful to you, potential employers, and to other educators who are thinking of delivering such courses. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to our International Business Today podcast series. We've released around 30 episodes thus far, and we're constantly, like right now, recording and releasing new episodes. And of course, we're very happy to receive your comments and suggestions. This is Professor Sarathi and my guest, Professor Greg Collier. Thank you for listening to us, and see you again on another podcast.